In an effort to avoid moralizing approach to the problem, as well as to keep from prejudicing the order of priority between ethics and politics, I propose to speak of the relation between ethics and politics in terms of intersection rather than of subordination. I see them as representing two spheres with separate centers of interest, each positing an original problematic while creating a common area of overlap, precisely through their intersection. Second remark. In addition to the intersection between the two circles of ethics and politics, I should also like to discuss the intersection of third circle, thereby examining economics along with ethics and politics. If I proceed in this way, it is because I expect to derive from the comparison between economics and ethics the means of determining what is specific to politics in order to better to contrast it in return to ethics. For it is the extent that politics raises its own problems and difficulties irreducible to economic phenomena, that its relations with ethics are themselves original and all the more sharply defined. I am therefore proposing the following figure, which shows three intersecting circles which areas common to the circle, 2 by 2 and to all three. The zones of confrontation and intersection are indicated by shading. If it is possible to define a political rationality, as I shall attempt to demonstrate later, it is economic social rationality that must be opposed. I'm basing my position here on the work of Hannah Arendt and Eric Well, authors, the first of A Human Condition and the second of two principal works, La Philosophie Morale and La Philosophie Politique. These two authors share the idea that the economic social spheres rest primarily on the struggle organized against nature, the methodical organization of labor, the rationalization of relations between production, circulation, and consumption. In this, our two authors remain faithful to the definition of economics developed from Aristotle to Hegel, passing by the way of English economics. For all these classical authors, the economic order is defined as abstract social mechanism rather than as concrete historical community. Aristotle also described economics as the extension of cooperation that one could observe in a household. Hannah Arendt tries to preserve this relation between economics and household in accordance with Greek-rooted word economics. I prefer to follow Hegel, who defined economics as a mechanism of needs and hence as an extant state, underscoring by the use of this adjective the difference with the integration from within characteristic of customs and mores of concrete historical continuity. It seems useful to me to keep Hegel's suggestion and follow Eric Well. To reserve the term society for the economic mechanism and that of the community for the exchange marked by history of mores and customs, in a sense, the economic social plane is an abstraction to the extent of the economic life of nation is incorporated into politics by the decision made by state. I'm not denying this intersection between economic and political, which indeed is depicted in my diagram. But it's impossible to stress that we have termed abstraction is precisely what characterizes the economic social order. It is, in reality, abstract, and its abstraction is reinforced by the increasing autonomy resulting from the constitution of an international market and worldwide extension of methods of work. In saying this, my intention is not to devaluate economic rationalization. I'm even prepared to state, along with Marx, follow on the point of Well, that a rational organization of labor has been and still is up to a certain point the great educator of individuals in the ways of reason. It does, in fact, constitute a discipline imposed on individual arbitrariness. The man of technology, of economic calculation, and social mechanisms, is the first man who lives universally and who understands himself by means of universal rationality. Admitting this point of the greatest importance for the correct definition of politics, and in particular of the state, for which the expansion of economic social sector of historical communities, there appeared a certain modernity. The modern state exists, one can assert. Whenever there's a society in which labor is organized with aim of methodical struggle of man against nature, modern society is a society for which this struggle, joined to the primacy according to the calculation and efficiency, tends to become the new form of sacred if it does not abolish purely and simply the difference between the sacred and profane. In order to understand in what way the political differs from economic, let us examine the inverse hypothesis, which would make the political simple variable of economic. This is what occurred, if not with Marx himself, at least with subsequent Marxism. Marxism's great lacuna, in my opinion, is not to have granted a genuinely distinct finality and in same stroke a specific pathology to politics. Because of the overestimating the role of modes of production in the evolution of society, for orthodox Marxism, we know political alienation cannot help reflecting economic alienations. All the evils of life in society can only result from surplus value. It self-interprets exploitation of labor from the perspective of profit alone. If one can show that the exploitation is tied to the private appropriation of the means of production, then any political regime is legitimate that proposes to suppress economic alienation resulting from the private appropriation of a means of production, and finally, the expropriation of labor by extortion of surplus value. Reducing the political to the economic in this way is responsible for the lack of interest shown by Marxist thinkers in a specific problem posed by the excess of power. Problems of eminently political nature, as we shall state below. It has become a terrifying drama for Europe and for the rest of the world that Marx, and even more so, Marxists saw the political struggle that led to political liberalism, such as it was observed in the 19th century in Anglo-Saxon countries, no more than a mere hypercritical scream for economic liberalism. There resulted from the identification between economic liberalism and political liberalism the dramatic Arrhenius belief that elimination economic liberalism has to be paid for by the loss of properly political benefits stemming from historical struggles as ancient as those of urban communities in Italy, Flanders, and Germany for self-determination. I myself see in Marxism-Leninism, regardless of what Marx himself thought, the purveyor of this dramatic identification between the two liberalism. I say dramatic identification because its effect has been a genuine political Machiavellianism, to the extent that the absence of autonomous political reflection has left the field wide open to all sorts of political experiments, including totalitarianism. Once the recourse to tyranny was justified by the suppression of the private appropriation of means of production, considered the sole criterion of modern alienation. It is against a backdrop of this catastrophic confusion between economic liberalism and political liberalism that I want to situate the following reflection, devoted precisely to the specificity of the political in relation to the economic and social sphere. The confrontation between ethics and politics will be all the clearer for this, and I propose as a transition to underscore along the well what he calls the dissatisfaction of modern man. The individual in modern society, he writes, is essentially dissatisfied. Why? For at least two reasons. First, because society that defining itself in purely economic terms is essentially a society based on struggle, competition, in which the individual are prevented from reaping the fruits of their labor. A society in which the various levels and groups confront one another without any mediation. The feeling of injustice that the rational society gives rise to. In the face of division of society into groups, levels, and classes, maintains isolation and insecurity of individual delivered over to the social apparatus. In the word, labor, on the level of economic society as such, appears at once as technically rational and humanly unreasonable. Moreover, the individual is dissatisfied, even toiling the labor for a modern society, because he finds no meaning in simple struggle against the natural, nor in the apology of a calculating efficiency. This is so true that in advanced industrial societies, at least meaning is sought more and more outside of work, and work becomes merely a means to gain leisure time, which in its return is organized along the lines of technical model work. In brief, work in advanced societies has ceased to be the great educator in the ways of rationality that Hegel and Marx saw it was. Out of the twofold dissatisfaction emerged from recourse to the living tradition of a historical community to the historical source, which the worldwide society of organized labor tends to reduce, dismantle, and dissolve. Whence, the strange paradox in which today advanced societies are caught. On the one hand, modern nations enter into technological competition in order to survive. However, to this very extent, they're caught up in the dissolving action exerted by technology, now ruling supreme over the ethical, political core of these societies. The individual in advanced industrial societies, placed at the crossroad economic and political, suffers from a contradiction between the logic of industrialization and old rationalities belonging to the political experience of peoples. It is in the effort to flee this contradiction that so many people, both young and not so young, turn back to private life, seeking survival in the privatization of happiness. This ferocious protection of private domain is observed, moreover, in all advanced industrial societies, whether of the East or the West. It is of fundamental importance for our later discussion of intersections with ethics to have restored to politics its proper dignity. If politics has a major claim to autonomy that demands recognition in the face of economics and technology, is a claim that rational action has a meaning inseparable, as we shall later find, from living morality, from ethical intention. Allow me to suggest in passing a terminological distinction that well expresses the nature of my intent. I should distinguish between the rational and the reasonable, and shall say that a technical economic level of life in society satisfies not only the demands of rational. It is why people are dissatisfied on this level. This is why they seek what is reasonable in concrete universal that defines politics as such. From text to action. I read it out to summarize UCL PPP project as situated within Anthropocene.